But a year ago, we had basically a negative savings rate in this country. We just weren't saving any money. We were addicted to debt. We were addicted to credit. And we just didn't keep any money in the piggy bank. There's a guy named Dave Ramsey who's on my network, and he's always like, cut up the credit cards, and you got to have the slush fund. It's got to be 3 to 6 months worth of payments in case you were to lose your job. We weren't doing that. Today, our savings rate in this country is 5.7%. It's very interesting. If you look at the 2 longest recessions post-World War II in the early 70s and in the early 80s, the savings rate in this country got to the low double digits. Now, we're not quite at low double digits, but what it says is that the American consumer is starting to change their habits. They're starting to pull back, take some of that recovery money in their paychecks and either pay down debt or conserve money. Now, that's not great for the ability for the economy to recover as quickly as any of us would like it to. On the other hand, it also is a very good and healthy sign that people are not rushing out there to get new lines of credit, to quickly rush out and spend, something that you've seen reflected in a lot of the retail sales numbers, that retail has been pretty weak. I'm sure you see it in some of the stores that you drive by or you look into. Some of them look like ghost towns. Sometimes you go to a mall, looks good. Usually it's because they're hanging out in McDonald's or TGI Fridays as opposed to actually spending money in the store. I don't know about you guys, but I think if I don't get something off for 50, 70% off, I'm not going to buy it. I mean, I see no reason to buy it whatsoever, whereas 6 months or a year ago, maybe I would have thought twice. Now I'm like, forget it. I'm not even touching it if it's the retail price. So the healthy news is that we're starting to change our habits. I was speaking to a guy who I used to work with on the New York Stock Exchange. He runs one of the best boutique firms down there, and he's an old fixture on there. He's been down there for a very, very long time, and he retired about 5 years ago. And he called me the other day, and he's living in Florida, and he's like, oh, thank God, Alexis, we made it through. We didn't have a lot of debt, but we've lost a lot of money in the markets, and we learned a lot of lessons. And I said, well, what have you learned in this process? And he said, I learned that I can't keep my money all in one place. Now, I've never really had enough money to think about it that way. But clearly he did. And so he walked through with me where he had different investments and with which institutions. And he said, I just never thought that some of the banks that have collapsed or some of the brokers that have collapsed, that would happen in my lifetime, that I'd actually have to worry about getting access to my money or my 401k or things of that nature. And it's true, it's real. I said to my husband the other day, are we sure that what we do as a couple, he's a small business owner, and obviously I work in TV, that where we have our money is right or safe, his small business angle and our individual personal angle. And so we talked about, should we be in 2 or 3 banks? Now, look, does that make our lives easy? No, it actually complicates things more. But one of the good things that came through this process is the FDIC did raise how much you're backed as an individual or as a couple. That's good, but maybe what we've learned is you can't keep all your eggs in one basket, just in the way that those GM workers have learned through the failure of General Motors. How many of those people, not because they were greedy or because they were a part of a union or because they invested in GM debt for their security and thought it was a fixed income payment when they were going to retire, did it because they thought, hey, this is one of the darlings, one of the blue chip companies in this country, and therefore my money's safe, and therefore they invested too much of it in one company. How many did that with AIG? How many did that with Citigroup? Think about that. That to me is the scariest part of it. I have 3 young boys, 7, 5, and 2, and I went to my 7-year-old school, and the principal asked me if I would speak to the middle schoolers and the high school kids and talk a little bit about what was happening to the economy. I'm sitting there with the kids, and I said to them, look, let me just put this in very simple terms for you guys. You guys can go buy a soda and a candy bar right now for the cost of one share of Citigroup. Bank of America at the time was like $5. Imagine. It would cost you more to buy a sandwich in New York than it did to buy one share of Bank of America. What a valuable lesson for your kids to know. Your kids will probably never, well, we hope never experience anything like this in their lifetime again. But imagine if our kids said, you know what, I'm going to learn from this experience, and instead of going out and getting an extra ticket to the movies or an extra, Raisinets, I'm actually going to go buy a share of Citigroup, and I'm going to learn what it means to invest in the value of a company. And, sometimes, at least for me, when you're in this wonky business and you're talking to all these heavy hitters and you got to know everything all the time, which becomes very challenging, too much multitasking, you sort of forget to step back and look at the really simple things that you do every single day. I found 6 months ago, I was having, 6 to 9 months ago, I think I was having heart palpitations because I was listening to these stories every day. And it was starting to affect me. I was starting to get really scared, really, really scared. I had family members who were being foreclosed upon and losing jobs, and even the most astute CEOs were panicking in a big way. And I went home and I sat down with my 7-year-old and I said, why don't we roll some coins? Now, when was the last time you were rolling quarters or dimes or nickels or pennies? I ironically wrote about it on my blog, and the next morning I got a flood of emails back with so many people who said that they went back and they were doing just the same thing. Even my mom emailed me and she said, Allie, I was doing that last night too. I was like, I got all the spare change because I want to figure out how much extra cash I have in the house. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I remember growing up as a kid, my grandmother used to save quarters in a jar. They wouldn't go out and buy a car, buy a coat, buy anything if they didn't save the money first. It was unheard of to go out and buy something with credit. Now, I don't know that we're all going to change that much, but I hope we change a little bit, and I certainly hope that our children change a little bit as a result of it. My kids are probably fairly brainwashed because, mom leaves at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and the TV's on, and they see mom talking to all these business guys. So now my 7-year-old's like, well, how much does that cost? Or how much did you buy this house for? Or, dad works for himself. How does he get paid? Now they're asking a lot more questions than I want to give the answers to. But I'm glad that more and more kids are engaged because their parents are feeling the pressure. And the worst thing people can do is clam up and not talk about that, because just as you and I and everybody in this room or friends and families are experiencing those changes, so too should the kids learn some of what all of this is about. Just finally, and we'll open up to questions, anything, I'm game for anything if you want to know what Sean Hannity's really like. I love him. The way I got into this business is really not the normal route. I was not a journalism major. I was a political science major. I went to Columbia, uptown, and I worked on Wall Street most of my career. I worked on Wall Street during the summers when I was in college, and I was addicted to sports. And part of the addiction of sports is the competition, the willingness or desire to win. I was a basketball player, and so, 3 seconds left in the game, who wants to be on the foul line? I was like, I want it to be me. And that's what Wall Street was like. And so I was so drawn to Wall Street because it was this environment that was so tense, very anxious-ridden, where you're trading hundreds of millions of dollars, but at the end of the day, you're trading that for somebody, for your grandparents, your friends, your family members. So you couldn't disconnect yourself from what you were doing every day. But it was like playing chess. You had to see 5 moves ahead.